Welcome to Mobile Rolling. After the break, we'll be back with one of South Australia's sporting personalities over the last 50 years. It'll be my pleasure to be talking to Dennis Michael Brown. Welcome back to Mobile Rolling. I'm joined here today by somebody, Dennis Michael Brown, better known as DB. Welcome, DB.
Thank you, Croc. It's been a long time, mate. How you going?
Going well, and yourself?
I'm getting there.
Good man, good man. So, yeah. I see you've been out for a walk this morning by the look of it.
Yeah. Got to keep up the exercises. You tend to let yourself go when you get a bit older, Croc. I don't know whether you've noticed or not.
Yeah, no, it's called old age, but we'll get there. Now, Dennis, a lot of people have known you from football, harness racing, media functions, lots of things. So let's start from the start. You were born in January 1948.
Year of the Invincibles, of course.
The year of the Invincibles at Hilton, wasn't it?
Yes.
And then you can lead on from there. You obviously, I think your dad was a policeman.
Yeah, he was a policeman at McGill in those days. Well, he got transferred there. We lived at Hilton, obviously, when I was born. And he got transferred to McGill early in the 50s. And I started going to school at the St Joseph Convent at Tranmere. And I was there for 2 or 3 years. And then I went to Ross Trevor College. And I started there in about 1955, I reckon, and went right through to 1964. That was my last year at college, and played all the sports.
So where were you living when you were sort of in those teenage years and stuff like that?
We're living at firstly McGill, and Dad then got transferred down to Lockleys, and I obviously went with Mum and Dad, and would have probably liked to have gone out on my own, but wouldn't have lasted long, I don't think.
You played cricket. Did you play football, or what sports did you play as a youngster?
This will come as a surprise to nobody, but actually, as a kid playing for Ross Trevor College, I got a kick in the head, which I was born deaf anyway, slightly deaf, and that really damaged my hearing. And the doctors advised me to give footy away, because if you got another knock, you'd be in more strife than Mandrake. But I adhered to that for a while until I thought, I can't wait anymore. So I started playing YCW footy. I loved that. And
what's YCW footy?
Sorry?
What's YCW
Young
footy?
Christian Workers.
Oh, like the YMCA.
A very popular form of the game back in those days. Used to play on the Sabbath, which was a surprise when you come to think of it, Young Christian Workers. But we played on a Sunday, and I took up umpiring.
Whilst you were playing?
Well, no, I umpired on the Saturday and
played on the Sunday.
Yeah, and that's of course where I first, I didn't actually first meet him there, but I got to know KG pretty well.
Oh yeah, right.
Early days of umpiring. Mum and Dad knew KG through a mutual friend, Des Hardy, who was also an umpire. He was actually influential in getting me into the broadcasting, because he used to do around the grounds himself.
Oh, yep.
And but
so what age?
That's down the track. But whilst I was at McGill, of course, and going to Ross Trevor College, when my last year at school was 64, and I joined the Kensington Cricket Club.
Mm-hmm. So you were a left-hander, weren't you?
Sorry?
Left-hander.
Yeah, left-hander. Yeah, opening bat, and played grade cricket there for 2 or 3 years until Dad got shifted down to Lockleys, where I joined West Torrens. But it was when I went to Kensington that I met a bloke with the same initials as me, who was chairman of selectors. But he was Donald Bradman. Well, I don't know whether he was Sir back then.
At the time.
He would have been Donald Bradman, and chairman of selectors.
And he met you as well, DB. So
yeah.
Winner.
I don't think anybody ever called him DB though.
No, was he the a little birdie told me he was chairman of the selectors, and he was watching you one day, and he was very impressed with the young lad, and made rather a rash shot, which took him by surprise.
I think I might have got the daily double or something in Flemington that day when Galilee won the Caulfield Cup. That's all I remember, and I was actually listening to it.
You did a Maxie Evans. You had the earpiece in, did you?
Well, actually, I did have a hearing aid back then, a little silver box.
Oh, okay.
You could have a silver box to pick up anything, you know. Because I had a little tranny there as well. So.
Oh, that's fair enough.
Yeah,
so you was overcome with joy that you made 50 and got the double at the same time, and got out in the same stroke.
Virtually.
Okay.
Couldn't believe it, but anyway, that's life.
Exactly. I don't think they're going to drop you from the team this year.
No, not this year anyway.
So. When you were living up there, were you interested in, like you say, you were in your early teens, were you interested in the harness racing then? Did you follow the trots?
Yeah, anything to do
how
with...
How did you get involved?
Yeah, anything to do with horses. I just, you know, I could do a phantom call. I used to do a phantom call at the convent in Tranmere when I first went.
And you upgraded later to the very infamous So-and-so Cup.
Yeah, well, yeah. People used to ask me, would I do it? And I said, yes, of course, I'd do the Cup, and I did. And yeah, it actually covered almost Australasia, because later on in life, when I got heavily involved with the harness racing, I used to do this famous race after the Inter-Dominion finished, the last race on the program.
It was the Inter-something Cup.
Yeah, all flock into the broadcast, the media box. And
I have heard a couple of those. Prior to you getting to that level, when you were a youngster, did you go to the trots in those days? You would have had trots at Barmah, Snowtown, all that, wouldn't you?
I actually started calling the trials at Campbelltown when I was about 11 or 12, because Dad used to drop me off at, as I say, I could do phantom race calls when I was in the height of grasshopper, and started doing the trials at Campbelltown and got to know, you know, people like Ray Richardson, the late Ray Richardson, Pat Hall, a famous Norwood footballer that was heavily involved in trots. And I got a funny feeling that Marino Marozzi was a famous name back then.
What about, would have Joe Screwers been training up that way then?
No, Joe was actually tied up with the Lewis stable, Alan Lewis.
Oh, yeah.
And of course...
they had a couple of nice horses.
Yes, over the years, and I used to go with Joe to the trots here and there, and to get to Barmah I used to go with a fella called Freddie Melville.
Oh yeah, had a lot of trotters, didn't he?
Freddie Melville. I don't know whether Fred's still alive. I wouldn't think he would be, but
he had a few trotters, not
he had
trotters,
mainly square gators, I remember the first opportunity I got to call the trot was at Globe Derby in the early days. When the trots were on a Tuesday, when they shifted from Wavell.
Yep.
And I used to be understudy to Bert Day back then, calling the races and the trots. And
you actually called them on the radio. Obviously, they wouldn't have had the television.
I called them on the radio back in early days.
60s, was it, or 70s?
Yeah, and back when the secretary's office, as we know it, today used to be a canteen or a cafe.
Yeah, understand.
And I'll never forget my first ever call. Bert couldn't make it one Tuesday; he was crook, and I picked up the reins. Yeah, nice cliche. And away I went. And the very first race on the program was a horse going round called Mabsuta, 100 to 1. Freddie Melville trained it. Never guess who had $1 each way on it. Yours truly. Well, I got so excited to finish, I don't know whether they finished, I didn't care. I know Mabsuta won, and that was the main thing.
So that was probably worth more than what you got to do on the job.
Yes, considerably. Considerably, yeah.
So, that was sort of an interest when you were a bit younger, then you got into calling, but you obviously had a job.
Yeah, I started work at G&R Wills when I first left school. I used to travel by bus into work. They were a wholesaler in Gawler Place.
So what did they sell? Everything?
Oh, they sold everything. You just name it, travel wear.
So a bit like a John Martin's or a David Jones, something like that.
Yeah, I started off in the men's hats, actually. That's why I'm seen these days I'm always wearing a hat. I got used to it. And,
how long did you work there?
Oh, gee, I reckon I was there for 4 or 5 years.
So in the meantime, you were doing harness racing and racing and that of it?
Yeah.
So, and I believe you were a very valued employee at one stage there. You've done a couple of employees of the year, apparently.
The guy that was in charge of the sporting goods Vern Carroll, I still remember his name. He wanted to get me up into his department because I'd won a couple of what they call employees' playtimes back then, which is
Impressive.
a lunchtime
Oh, okay.
thing that I know what you're thinking, Croc, but not quite. Not at that. I was too young for that stuff anyway at that age.
I wasn't thinking of anything, DB, but
And
The
of
business
course, they used to
company.
get all the, the companies like the wholesalers and retailers,
yep.
like Johnny Martins and
Put on a-
Myers,
put on a
and-
feast and that.
and they'd pick out their best talent for that particular company. And they'd have a grand final, and I'd won it 2 years in a row. Obviously, doing a Phantom race course. One was a Melbourne Cup, and the other was an Inter Dominion. So. And that's where I got the nickname Bert, because I knew I was doing a bit of work for
but
5AD at the
for Bert
time. Yeah, but after the late Bert Day.
so how long did you stay with GNR Wheels, or
Yeah, about 4
years?
4 to 5
And then-
years.
then you
but I actually got I was
left
asked,
for Greener
I was asked to
Pass?
leave by Vern eventually because he considered that I was spending too much time reading the form. He said, "You'll never make anything of that, son." He said, "I'm sorry, I've got to let you go."
let you go, which is in those days they call it sack.
Yeah,
Today they
yeah,
just let you go.
well, yeah, the Khyber Pass kick.
So where did you actually go from there to, DB? What was
I went
what was-
to John Martin's of all places, and
They unwrapped.
down to the bulk store at Lockley's because it was close to work, and Dad knew the boss, obviously, being the local copper. And,
He had to give you a
I
jump.
sort of walked straight in there, but that was a good job. I enjoyed it. I was driving their semis and shuttles and trucks and the forklift. Loved the forklift. Yeah, used to drive around it was a huge place, and that's where the pageant. The
So
Christmas
forklift
pageant-
lover, really?
Exactly.
Not a bad name for a horse.
I dropped a few pallets every now and then, but
We're all
didn't
allowed
do
a
much.
mistake now and
damage.
again, aren't we?
Sorry.
We're all allowed a mistake now and again,
Yeah,
DB, aren't we?
yeah.
Like it's not
But-
like you dropped a dozen of them, did you?
Well,
Might have been.
after a period, I might have.
So So in that time, how old would you have been then? Early 20s?
Early 20s, I would
Yeah.
have.
Okay. So still playing
by the
cricket
time-
or anything, or you?
Oh yeah, I was still playing. I was playing for West Torrens then.
Yeah.
Actually,
Any good cricketers that you can remember playing at Torrens at the time?
Oh yeah, there was quite a few actually. One of them was called David Hooks,
Oh,
who
really?
played his first C grade game in the season that I was playing with. There was Ian Ravenscroft,
Yeah.
Ravo. He was playing there. Oh gee, with who else? Roger Sweet,
Oh yeah,
Sweetie, yeah.
Yep. From the car.
Yeah, got
the car. man.
XL Rent-A-Car.
XL Rent-A-Car, yeah.
And ended up marrying Bob Hanks' daughter, the late Bob Hanks' daughter, Judy.
Okay.
and
Well,
they-
Bob
they-
Hank was on our story the other week with Rex Vanstone because he named the
Yeah,
last horse he got.
And
Bobby Hanks.
one of the nicest blokes you'd ever
Yeah,
met.
yeah. I'm the West Torrens man. Lindsay Head,
Yeah.
Freddie Bills, all
Yeah,
that.
the loaf of bread, as we called him.
Yeah. So how long? So that was in your 20s. So you, when did you sort of become more heavily involved in Globe Derby, sort of the harness racing? Through many
Well,
things, including
once
the
I started,
Inter-Dominion.
I got it because I was in the media. I actually got into writing when there was a journo strike in the 80s, and I tried to Google it, and they had all sorts of strikes. I didn't realise they had so many, but because at that stage I was working at the Advertiser in the circulation department.
So you went from.
I went from Johnny.
John
Well,
Martin.
I ended up going from the bulk store into town because they thought I showed lots and lots of promise, and they put me in charge of the home brewing department. That was when
there is a God.
That's when home brewing was the big go.
That's a
and
convent upbringing to put you in there.
some of the stories I could tell about the old blokes that were trying to get their beer, you'd have to let it ferment, and there was a long period and all this sort of stuff. Blokes would bring it back after a week and say, "This stuff tastes horrible." I said, "How long you had it down?" He said, "Oh, about 4 or 5 days." I was going, "Mate, you weren't listening to what I was telling you. Read the instructions." Oh,
So the stress got too much, so you got out.
Sorry?
The stress got too much, so you got out of the brewing
I couldn't
department and
handle
went into.
I used to sample the products every now and then, but
So from John Martin's, you went to
John Martin's, I went to the Advertiser.
the Advertiser as a what was your
Circulation.
circulation
Yeah.
man. So that's sort of like a rep.
That's a rep. You go around the different news agencies and delis that had the paper
Oh,
and
yeah.
make
So
sure
you're
everything
trying
was
to
okay.
get them to buy the product.
I was a member of the Federated Clerks Union then,
Okay, so that's
so you'd have to go out and do it and come back and report on it.
so then you went to after that there was a strike. I can remember that strike. I think Trevor Scadden was working at the Advertiser on that strike.
Yeah. And Trevor was high up at
and-
Advertiser back then. And of course, that Ben, people
His
that
son.
know harness racing would know Benny Scadden.
His son there.
Very promising young rider, along with Leo Schlenk back in that era. But yeah, Trev was there then, and they had this big strike. And I remember sitting at the Footy Park one afternoon doing the footy around the grounds, and Merv Agars, who was sporting editor there for a long, long time, came up to me and said, Dennis, would you be interested in writing for us? He said, we can't print a paper because there's no journo. And I said, oh, yeah, I'd love to, So I went and wrote, I had to write under the non-day plume, and I picked Hal Wes, the former great Tasmanian pacer.
Yep.
And I wrote under that non-day plume, and for the Dogs, I wrote the Dogs as well, and I wrote Worthing. They were both champions in their era.
And that was you. So how long did you do that for?
I did that until the AJA, which was the Australian Journalists Association, took the advertiser to court. They wanted to blackball me and the Tiser for me working during the strike.
Yeah.
But I wasn't a member of the AJA, I was the Federated Clerks Union. It was the AJA that went on strike.
Okay.
And it went to court, and it went for quite a while actually, but obviously the advertiser won. And that actually opened the door for sporting identities that could write a
Right,
bit.
so yeah, like you.
Once upon a time you'd have to do a 3 or 4 year course to become a journo.
So
And
now
that opened the door for anyone that could handle a pen,
you can do the stories.
So I was at the Tiser for quite a while, long time. 25 years in
So
that.
did you wrote stories on what, gallops, dogs, trots?
I started out mainly harness racing. In fact, that's where the term, I had a column in the paper back in those days called Mobile Rolling. And that was, I thought, what am I going to call this column?
Well, all this time Max told me he came up with this.
No, I can assure you he didn't.
Well, we might need to get lawyers onto this as well, DB.
Yeah, well, we better get Donald Trump, one of Donald Trump's lawyers, I think. What do you reckon?
Yeah, well, we could do with him in the trots at the moment. I can give you a strong tip.
Okay. So that's how my career started at the Tiser, and then I got involved more heavily with 5AA when they started in 1984. They actually got the rights, out of the blue, they got the rights to doing the footy, and that's when I called the odd race or two as well for AA as well as 5AD. But I've got to tell you the story about calling for 5AD. Murray Tippett was a sporting editor back then, terrific bloke Murray, and we went to Murray Bridge on this particular Wednesday. Bert was crook. Now, I knew about horses, but never ever sort of went to the races as much as the trots, occasionally go. With a couple of mates maybe to have a wager or something, but the colours of the racing were completely different to me knowing my colours at the trots because of calling trials and going every week and what have you. And this day Dad gets a phone call from Bertie's crook. I've got to go to Murray Bridge and call the card. And of course I really, about the very first time I've ever been, second time I've ever been really nervous. The first time was when I called the first race at Port Perry on radio. But the second time was calling the first race at Murray Bridge. It was a maiden hurdle. So I'd never seen the horses before in my life, 16 in it, and fair dinkum. I went down to the mounting yard and I'm trying to get the colour, because the name, the colour name, trainer, knew some of the trainers' colours, but I couldn't find any of the trainers that had horses in the maiden hurdle. I'm going, oh no. Well, luckily they didn't televise them back in that day because a few of the owners would have committed Harry Carey, I'm sure. Listen to me call this race. I honestly had no idea where they were. I'm calling them, they go in the back. I obviously had the first and second horse. And I reckon I had them jumping hurdles that weren't even there. I had them going over here and going over there.
That's the good thing about the radio, see? you can say what you like.
Eventually I got through it and I got through the card. So that was, I'll never forget that day. And I blessed my stars that they were covering it on TV because I did a bit of broadcasting after that for the odd race or two. And
so did you, with Globe Derby and that, did you call it Globe Derby on the radio itself, or?
Only ever did the midweek, never...
So who was calling? Who was a Saturday caller when you were there?
Oh, there's a couple.
So what period of time are we talking? So the 80s through to the 80s and 90s?
Well, whoever was broadcasting for the TAB station, like there was I don't think
Well,
Kevin Dare gave
well,
it yet.
we had Bruce McAvenny, we had Peter Smith.
Flash, yeah, Flash, yeah, he called, yeah.
And Bruce McAvenny, and then we did have Peter Smith and
Yeah,
Terry McCall.
Pete Smith,
Pete went to
Terry
Bathurst
Mack.
and back again.
Yeah, Ronnie Paps called the
Ronnie
odd.
Paps,
yeah,
yeah,
Ronnie Paps called
Ron
the
Paps,
odd
yeah.
race or two, yeah.
So,
but I used to do a lot of the interviews trackside, if you remember.
yeah, I do, and any of the media shows. So we had the situation. So you've had a strong influence in harness racing. Your son Craig, he was a trainer driver.
Yeah,
at
he
one
was
stage.
trainer driver. He actually won the tipping one year.
Did he?
Yeah,
He-
Tolly's Padare,
Tolly
I'll give him a-
which is up the top of Hope Valley,
Yeah,
of the Grand Junction Road.
yeah,
So
he won the tipping. So yeah, he was a trainer driver. And
So that you had in those days, the Media Guild was sponsored by cigarette companies and Ansett
Yeah,
Airlines,
yeah,
and,
so
and it was a big shebang, wasn't it? It was,
Yeah,
it was,
exactly,
It was
yeah.
good. Like, you know, the Lady and Fewings and that were in it, and
I must mention Effie, as what the nickname, initials IF. He, one of nature's gentlemen. He was just a
Ray
fantastic bloke.
yeah.
Ian, and it was so sad to see him. 1 minute he was at the trots with us all. 3 or 4 days later he was gone. It was so sad. He was just a terrific bloke. Yeah.
Well, we'll wrap up that's part one of a very interesting interview with DB, and we hope that you can join us next week for part two. Thank you.